Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and namaste. Welcome to this episode of the podcast series Igniting Joy. This is where we speak with those who are making a difference around them in their communities and, in short, helping us all move towards what I would like to think would be a better world. My guest today is engaged in bringing joy not only to humans, but others that we must coexist with on this planet. And that in itself should make it a lot more joyous for all of us too. So we are going to have that conversation today. My guest today is Preethi Srinivas. Preethi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Preethi Srinivas is a user experience researcher at an American multinational technology company. We are not supposed to name them, so we will not. She holds a PhD in human-computer interaction from Indiana University and a master's in computer science from Miami University. For over a decade, she has worked in multiple domains, focusing her work on uncovering people's behaviors, needs, and motivations to build, let me check my notes, intuitive and enjoyable products that empower people and change their lives in meaningful ways. So I think this is not entirely at odds with her work, that she's on a mission that comes straight from the heart, advocating for human-cow friendship through acts of love and selfless service. Human-cow friendship, folks. That's what we're going to talk about today. She continues to volunteer in person and assist remotely in different capacities at multiple cow shelters and sanctuaries across the globe. So Preethi, once again, welcome to the show. And I have to get right into it with you because there are others. Well, you've explained this a little bit to me, but I think they may have the same questions I have. We have coexisted with cows, we human beings, for, I don't know, maybe forever. In fact, you and I grew up in India, so we know we coexist with cows and sometimes not so friendly scenarios too. They are everywhere where we don't want them even. But it's considered to be okay. So I didn't think there was any animosity here. What do you mean by human-cow friendship? What exactly does it mean, the way you look at it or the way you've been practicing it?
Sure. Yeah. I don't think I have the capacity to define the human-cow friendship, but I can share what I think about it and what I have experienced personally. So human-cow friendship is selfless. It's without expectations. It's being open. It's trusting. So when we can think about a human-human friendship, something very similar can exist in human-cow friendship, and it's actually much more pure because sometimes, even in a human-human friendship, there could be moments when trust can falter, but that never happens in a human-cow friendship, at least from my experience. Right? It's being open, it's being selfless, it's being trusting of the cow, and the cow trusting of me. Right? So that's the kind of relationship I'm talking about.
So here's, the thing. I mean, you say this and you've said this to me before, and I believe you. If I didn't, I wouldn't invite you to come have this conversation with me. But, I'll tell you something. We were supposed to do this outside with the cows, with your friends. And the weather has not been cooperating lately. And so we've not gotten out there. And even though I was looking forward to it, one part of me was, a little relieved. And the reason was, even when you talk about this trust, I think that's where I need you to help someone like me understand how do we build that? Because no matter how much I trust that I'm a friend, friends with the cow. I mean, me personally, I think I have a little fear that I might get kicked with by the cow using one of her hind legs or something, So I don't know. I mean, do you spend a lot of time with them? Does it become at some point like other pets people may have or the bonds they develop, right? Because I know I have a lot of friends who have dogs, for example, as their pets, and they and there's a bond that is almost like a parent-child bond, right? Do you develop that kind of feeling when you start to engage more with them?
Yeah, you said that right. So first of all, to your point about whether or not cooperating, I think you did promise that you will come. So we are definitely going to make that trip, probably, in one of these coming days, once the weather kind of settles down.
I promise you I will do that. In fact, we will not go on the air with this show if I haven't already done it. So,
That's great. So in terms of like developing the bond that does exist, it's not like you just walk into like a cow shelter today and then, within like your very first interaction, you're going to have that friendship develop. There will be some form of emotion transfer. Definitely. Chances are that, you're going to go and be able to touch the cow, and the cow is going to like approve of you touching her without kicking you, right? So that is definitely going to happen, but then the trust is established over a period of time. So you keep going again and again, and it's almost like you're building a bond, and that exists with dogs as well, right? So or any other pet for that matter. So it's over a period of time. And historically, cows have often been thought of as extended family members, whether it is in India or in the US or anywhere in this world. And there is definitely this form of familial relationship, which kind of builds to being much more than, oh, you're a family member. You are more than that, and you're my friend.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully I won't get kicked. I don't know why I have that fear in my head, but I think with you by my side, maybe I'll be okay. So,
yeah, I guess to soften it for you, in my first interaction was actually not with a cow; it was with a bull. The bull is like over 7 feet tall, is over like 2,000 pounds. He's standing there staring at me, right? And then he was definitely tied to a rope, and this was in a rescue shelter, and this was during rescue, like the visitor hours, right? So I was there, and he stared at me. I stared at him. A part of me was like, okay, Preethi, just walk away before something bad happens. But there was something in his presence, right? Some aura that was so calm, and it was almost like he was inviting me into his space. And it was like he was communicating to me. Of course, I don't understand cow language, and I don't know if he understands.
You don't? I'm disappointed. I was going to ask you about it.
So I'm basically narrating a story 2 years ago, right? Even now, I'm probably just still learning the language, but then for me, a part of me, just like how you're feeling, I just wanted to walk away. But then I felt like I had to stay there, and he created that situation. Right?
So that's encouraging that nothing bad happened, and when I go, I'll keep that in mind, and I also tell myself that if that's how I have to get started as well, maybe we start with a bull, and I would tell myself this bull represents Nandi bull, and I should not feel too afraid of people who know the reference will know that that's a very reassuring reference. But let's come back to ask you a question that has been on my mind, because you told me in our conversation before today that 2 years ago, almost by pure accident, you embarked on this journey. Yep. How did that happen?
Sure. Yeah, I think 2 years ago, most of the world was kind of struggling with staying at home and, because of the pandemic and everything. And I had a personal issue myself as well. And, I have this habit of seeking out spiritual content. And this has been there right from my childhood. And so this was a time when, again, I don't know, something in me reminded me that I had to get into that habit more. Because probably I may have forgotten that with me aging and moving to a different country and then getting busy with like studying and working and everything. So I started listening to some spiritual discourses, and listening was the easiest mechanism for me as opposed to like actually reading, because I would actually pop my AirPods in, and then I can be like, I can go out for a walk where it's like an open area, and I'm not necessarily, I guess I'm not necessarily being in a crowded space, even though there were like, rules around like staying at home and all of that. Or I may be like cooking and then I'll listen to this, or I may, just be doing like some stretching activity and then I'll listen to some spiritual discourses. And there was very common in all of these discourses that kind of stuck with what I was listening to. And that was that there was this discussion about the supreme power loving cows. right? And then the way the discourses described this love was very interesting for me, right? And I was very curious. I was like, I have seen cows when I was a child in India, but I've never really interacted with one in the past. But as I listen to these discourses, I'm like, I want to go interact with a cow. I want to know who a cow is, who is a bull, like why do they exist on this planet? Like why am I not able to do that, right? So I guess I had to wait for a year to be able to actually go see an actual cow or a bull, because again, because of pandemic, things were closed and I couldn't really go anywhere. But I had that desire, and that desire just kept growing over the year. And finally, I looked up online, and I think the website still said the rescue shelter is closed. There is one here in California that I was able to visit. I just called the number, and luckily that day, the person who kind of takes care of that rescue shelter, he responded my call. And I was like, are you open? Because your website says you are closed. And he was like, yeah, we are actually closed for visitors because of the pandemic. But if you really want to see, we can do like by appointment. We have to make sure that you're following all the, masking policy and all of that. And so I did get an appointment, and then that was my first visit, right? And so it was a journey of like listening, being interested in that topic, and being more curious, and having that desire to actually go and see a cow or a bull.
And would you say that because we were at that time at the early part of this pandemic, which technically still, maybe I don't know if it's technically over or not, but I don't think we're done with this yet. Do you think that, because we all had certain realizations and we were in a different frame of mind as well, plus we were sort of limited in what we could be doing outside. Did all of that contribute to this? I mean, it's almost like it seems to me like a perfect storm, right? Like a lot of forces aligned to get you, to go there. And it seems like it was from the way you describe it, like a pivotal moment. And here we are talking about it today.
Very much. I strongly believe that the universe willed for it to happen, right? And things had to align, and which meant I had to wait for a year for this to happen. Which actually means I had to wait for all of my life for this to happen, right? Just 2 years ago, this whole thing happened. So I had to wait all my life until up to like 2 years ago for me to actually get on to like doing that first baby step, right? So.
So when you are with the cows, how do you feel?
Well, I think I feel calm. I wouldn't say there are definitely moments of lot of joy, right? But I don't want to create this impression that I will go. People can go to cow if they want to feel happy. That will become a transaction again, right? So that's the last thing I want to create. You're definitely going to have, if you are this person who happens to have like different feelings, which I think most people do, right? So you're going to have moments of joy, you're going to have moments of sorrow and all of that. Do not go to a cow with the expectation that if I go to a cow, I'll feel better. Because then it's you're going with an expectation. It's not selfless anymore. That I think that's what worked out really well for me, because when I went with a curious mind without expecting anything really other than the fact that I just want to know who's a cow or who's a bull. Right. So having that kind of open mind and then walking into like a rescue shelter to actually interact with them. And one of the other things I also did was not just go there and, pet them or massage them. I actually put myself in the rescue shelter, meaning I would go there and help out. Right. So I will go clean. I will go feed the cows. If we have to like give a shower for the cow or the bull, I would actually participate actively in all those activities. And this meant I had to learn all of it. I had to learn how to do them. Right. So it's over a period of time.
So it's almost like you have invested yourself in this aspect of your life, just like you would in any other. And that's just, to a person who's fairly selfish like myself, that is amazing, is all I can say. but see, now everybody is not just one person, or one aspect of something doesn't define a person. You are also a scientist, a researcher. You work at this tech company that we are not allowed to name, but well, it's okay. People understand that sometimes we're not supposed to take those names. It's all right. But how do you see your work there in the light of, in light, your passion for human-cow friendship seems to have become a major, if not a massive driving force in your life. How and your work is it at odds, or do you find there is some harmony in what you do at your, for lack of a better word, day job, and the investment you've made in the mission of human cow friendship?
Yeah, so I think my role at this company, and the only reason why I didn't want to name the company is because it's not relevant to the topic we are discussing.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I like to joke about it and pull your leg. That's okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess my role is again, as you mentioned, like for my day job, I'm actually a user experience researcher, and really what that means is I help understand human or people's needs or feelings when they are actually using a technology product, right? And what could their needs, and how can we actually meet those needs? How can we make a technology product more easy for someone to use so that their need is kind of met? Right. And sometimes this would mean that there is no product at all, right? And it's like in very early phase, and we are actually trying to understand what is the problem we are actually trying to solve, right? And sometimes it could mean that there is an actual product, and we are trying to figure out, okay, does the product actually meet the person's need? So that's my actual, that's what I studied in school, and that's what I'm working on a day-to-day basis. But the underlying craft of this entire job is being able to understand another human being. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? How can we actually get someone to tell us what they are feeling without leading them into telling us what we want them to tell us? So there's a slight difference there, right? So how can we actually do that? I guess that kind of started getting into my human cow relationships, right? So I got into a pattern of like going to different rescue shelters, not necessarily just where I'm residing or whichever city I'm residing at, but actually to other cities as well. So sometimes I'll travel for vacation and I'll be like, oh, is there a rescue shelter there? Can I actually go visit and learn from what they are doing there and try and understand?
I'm sorry, but it seems like you're turning these rescue shelters into your own personal Airbnbs.
Probably not, because I wouldn't stay there for free. I would actually spend to rent a room outside, and then I'll stay there, of course, right? Because no one's going to let a stranger come to their shelter and be like, oh, yeah, you can stay here. It doesn't work that way. In fact, actually, I think in 2021, if I'm right, I moved to Texas for 4 months, right? And of course, that meant I had to like take care of my day job, right? So I had to have like a conversation with my manager and be like, is it okay if I actually moved to a different city and worked remotely from there? And somehow it worked out because we had a work from home policy back then. And even now, I think it's kind of still in place. So how can I, sort of balance? And so during the day, I would actually make sure I'm working on my actual day job. And then in the evenings, I will go out to the shelter and then I'll help out and learn what they are doing. And of course, they didn't allow me to stay on their site, right? They couldn't accommodate me. So for 4 months, I actually rented an apartment and then I moved all my stuff there. So I guess that was a pattern. That's kind of the pattern I got into, and that's how I guess I got exposure to multiple rescue shelters. After I made the move to Texas, I had to like manage my time, right? So I had to take care of what I was doing during my day job versus what I was doing out of this interest or passion for understanding about human-cow relationship. And so during the day, I would work, and then in the evening, I would go out to the rescue shelter, and then I'll try and interact with people there, learn what they are doing. And then also in that process, my skill as a UX researcher or user experience researcher kind of kicked in. Right? That's when I started interviewing people, and I was like, just out of curiosity, right? I really had no plan in mind at that time. For me, it was basically just understanding. I was just very curious. And so I would talk to people, and then I'll try to understand where they are coming from. What are their feelings? What are their perceived outcomes? Why would anyone want to set up a rescue shelter in the first place? Right. So those were things that I was very interested in, and that kind of just kept going. So every time I visited a rescue shelter, I would do that.
So when you're with the cows, do you perceive in some ways that they are happier with, because they can sense that here is human being that is really, they've got this. And obviously, the people I would like to think who work at these shelters, right? They do that because they want to do it, and therefore, hopefully, there's a bond between them and the cows and bulls there as well. So they feel that the closeness.
There's very much a bond. There's very much a bond, but there's always a story, right? The very first time the cow was brought to a shelter, the cow was very scared because cows and bulls both have lost trust in humans, right? Because day in and day out, they are being taken to slaughterhouse, right? So they kind of know if they are moved to a different location, they know that something is wrong and that their life is in danger. So they're always going to be in this kind of like, hey, I need to flee mode, right? So almost any rescue shelter, wherever I've met people, they've often shared stories of like, oh, when we brought this cow to our shelter, the first thing she did was actually run away, and then we had to bring her back and we had to like figure out what to do. And it's over time that the cow starts trusting the humans, right? And at that moment, when that trust is established, it actually becomes really beautiful because the cow will not eat without the human feeding them.
Oh, that's
Human would not go to sleep without feeding the cow, right? So it's a very, very beautiful relationship from then on. But the first, that kind of barrier that needs to be crossed, I think is the toughest one for most rescue shelters. And in general, about your, to your question about whether they are happy or not, in general, most cows, they have this attitude towards welcoming people into their space, right? So there is actually an energy transfer between the human and the cow whenever the human enters a cow space. And the cow in general can sense if the human is going through some kind of emotional distress or they are, let's say, happy. Irrespective of what the human is experiencing, cows can sense that, right? And depending on whatever energy they are sensing, they will actually respond to that. So sometimes you may come across cows who are very playful, right? So if you happen to be in a very happy mood, they want to play with you, right? So they will butt you, they will run, and they'll ask you to run with you. So there are just so many beautiful experiences that you will experience once, let's say, you've kind of established that kind of bond or friendship with that cow. And there's like a scientific thing I also want to share, which I think will be valuable for your listeners. Mm-hmm. So a cow's body heat is higher than that of a human, right? And her heart rate is lower than that of a human. So when the human comes closer to the cow and is actually bonding with the cow, what happens is the human's physiological measures actually neutralize to match that of the cow. And so your heart rate, if you happen to be this person who has like a very high heart rate, who's always tensed or is anxious, it'll neutralize, it'll come down. If you happen to be in a setting where it's actually pretty cold, when you come near the cow and let's say you place your body against that of a cow, your body heat will actually raise to match that of the cow. And so that entire relationship is actually a very warming and calming relationship. It's kind of similar to what people do with dogs, right? So when you're actually petting a dog and hugging the dog, you experience something very similar. The only difference with cow is cow happens to be a mammal of larger size, right? So it's kind of a different effect. And also what happens is from a human's end, cortisol production kind of reduces. And then from the cow's end,
please explain for those who may not know what that is.
So cortisol is a hormone that is usually generated when let's say it's kind of like you have to act on something, right? So sometimes you're like fleeing, you're in kind of like, hey, I need to flee, I need to do something, that kind of mode. If you are filled with a lot of cortisol, you are actually generating a lot of inflammation in your body, which kind of results in all this pain and everything, right? So today, a lot of people, when they talk about like nutrition and well-being, they often try to think about ways to reduce inflammation and reduce cortisol production. So you can experience that by just bonding with the cow. From the cow's perspective, there's a hormone called oxytocin that's generated in her body. And what this hormone does is it actually calms her down. It relaxes her. If the cow happens to be a cow who's already lactating, then she'll be able to easily lactate.
The fact that, that there can be this kind of back and forth between a human being and a cow, and it can actually, physically produces physiological response within human beings, which is beneficial, right? When you talked about heart rate and body temperature and all, I'm thinking I'm not a doctor or a medical expert, but I'm guessing some of this can have, a positive impacts on people who have blood pressure issues or other conditions that, so this is very interesting. You did tell me a little bit at some point, and I think we didn't dwell on it. Maybe now's the time to talk about it. Is this what the cow cuddle therapy is all about?
That is true. Yeah, it's related to this. So there's a lot of research in this field about not just they are different names for it. It's cow cuddling, it's cow hug therapy, but really it's the act of expressing love towards the cow and the cow reciprocating with that love. Right. So, and the way you do that, it kind of differs from place to place. In some places, they actually give you a brush. They hand out a brush, and then you can brush the cow. So the bristles in the brush are very similar to the texture of a cow's tongue. So when you're actually brushing the cow visualizes another cow is actually licking her, right? And so that's the act of expressing love. In some places they are like, you can just use your hand and you can just like pat her or just touch her. Yeah, so it kind of differs. In some places they let you sit next to a cow and meditate, right? And because cow creates that calm and serene effect, it's a lot easier for people to actually sit down and meditate. And then in some places you are given your own kind of privacy. You're with the cow, you can actually talk to the cow. Like this is a part of care farming therapy. So care farms are basically they're based on this model that an entire farm is set aside for people who may be undergoing like depression or who have other mental health needs. Maybe someone undergoing bereavement. They can come to the farm and participate as people who contribute to taking care of the farm. Right. So this is where, again, the selfless service kicks in, because when you actually come in as like a person who takes care of farm activities, you first of all learn how to do those activities. And then you're considered as this person who can be like an expert in this field. And you are also this person who is undergoing a lot of overwhelming emotions, right? So for you to actually vent it out, you can interact with these animals because animals listen. Unlike humans, what happens is generally when you actually go to another human and you're like, hey, I'm undergoing this issue, to a greater extent, human gets into the solutioning mode. They do listen, but really oftentimes what people want is just silence and just listening and understanding without any judgment, right? Which exists in some places, but not always. So this is another alternative to like, can we actually use care farms as a mechanism to get people to overcome those emotional, mental health needs?
Wow. Boy, you've opened up a whole world for me, and I'm sure for many others. So maybe this is the time for us to take a little break. Not so much of a break, but we're going to switch tracks a little bit. We do this on the show. Our guest always picks out a song, and you have picked one out too. So we're going to play that for a bit, and then we will return to our conversation. I like the beat of the song. It is so, it just gets you going. You want to get up and start tapping on that. It's, so again, folks, that was the Gaushala song composed by Kartikeya Murthy with lyrics by Prashant V. Srivastav Musafir and produced by none other than Preethi Srinivas, our guest today. And if you're just tuning in, we are speaking with scientist, researcher, technologist, and practicing champion for human-cow friendship, Preethi Srinivas. So, Preethi, it's quite obvious why you picked this song, given the conversation we are having. But tell us, what is its significance?
Sure, yeah. As I was listening to the song, I was actually reminded of like memories from how this song even just came about, right?
Tell
So,
us.
this song actually, the seed for the idea actually came from me, but then some of the concepts that are in the song actually is from the founder of a Goshala in Texas. So the Goshala, the other name for Goshala is cow shelter or rescue shelter, right? And the founder in Texas, his name is Abhinav Goswami. And when I moved to Texas, that was the first time I actually met him, right? I think I met him sometime early 2021, and I just walked into their shelter, and I looked at what he was doing. If for folks who are interested, there is actually a couple of blog articles about him on his journey and what he did, and why he actually founded like a rescue shelter in Texas, United States, which happens to be a state where there are more consumers of beef, right? So he has his own journey. But when I walked into his shelter, I looked at him, his family, and I was like, you're very lucky. You're living just right next to cows, and you get to go visit cows and see them. And he said one thing that really changed the rest of my life, right? He was like, "What's stopping you?" And when I heard that, I was actually taken aback, and I was like, you know what? He's right. What is stopping me? I don't know what's stopping me. And that's when I actually decided to move to Texas and then just stay there for 4 months, right? So just the backstory. But for the actual song, some of the concepts that are included in the song is things about how can we think about a rescue shelter as a hotspot. Right. So today, oftentimes when you go to a rescue shelter, they are dependent on financial contributions from someone. Right. And oftentimes those financial contributions are used to take care of the animals in the shelter to sort of pay for, people who are helping out in the shelter. Now, this is a good model, but it's not a great model, right? Because you're dependent on someone for your financial assistance. One way to kind of flip that is to make a rescue shelter sustainable on its own. And how do we do that? Well, there are some shelters where people think about, can we actually milk the cows? Then it's no longer a rescue shelter, right? You're kind of like trying to make money, and it's no longer non-profit, it's for profit. But how can you do it in a way that it is not necessarily harmful for the cows? And it's actually, all you're doing is you're generating revenue to kind of feed the cows. And so what are other ways you can tackle this? And one way is to think about, well, there is cow waste 365 days in a year, which means like forever. You're going to keep getting cow waste. You're not going to force the cow to give you cow waste. But what does cow waste contain? It contains a lot of nutrients, right? And those nutrients can be used to tap into regenerative farming. Those nutrients can be used to tap into medicine, can be used cow waste to generate biofuel. So there's just so much around just cow waste, and it's not necessarily waste, right? So we call it waste, but it just comes with a lot of wealth that we can tap into. And so that's really the message in the song, which is like, let's all try to be friends with cows. Let's go, spend time with cows. Let's serve cows. And let's try to build an ecosystem that is sustainable. It is closed loop in a way that you're not necessarily, depending on someone else for you to take care of yourself. And when I actually heard this message, I had to like think through that message and then see how well it applies and everything. But I wanted to share this message with everyone else, just like how I had heard it. I wanted to share it with everyone. Right. So I went to this founder, Abhinav, and I was like, hey, I want to produce a song, and I want to actually create the entire concept. I want to actually communicate it through this medium of a music video. He was like, you always come up with these random ideas, but I'm very supportive of what you want to do. But I'm very interested to see where this goes. But then back then I didn't know anyone who will compose music for me, who will write the lyrics, and everything just fell in place, right? So it somehow feels like, again, the universe built for it to happen, because from the point when I actually had that idea to the point when it was actually produced and the day it was released, all of that, it seemed like it is something that was built by the universe. And I've actually written an article about this on my blog for people who want to go read.
Yeah, please do share that, as well as I want our listeners to know that this song, which you will hear in its entirety at the end of this episode, is also there's a very wonderful YouTube video, and you might even, if you're watching carefully, catch glimpses of our guest today on it as well. So she does make her appearance kind of very Hitchcockian. No, not really Hitchcock. It's not like Alfred Hitchcock. Those are different kinds of appearances, but certainly she does appear in that as well. And it's a wonderful video. And the question I have about this really quickly is, where can you've been working on other songs. You've got a couple others out as well. Where can folks listen to this and other songs you might produce? Do they go to your blog, or do they go to some central place where, if they are interested, they can get all this content?
I do have an online presence. I have a website. It is called befriendcows.com. And you can go look for content on my website. I do have presence on YouTube. So again, YouTube channel is Befriend Cows. On Instagram, TikTok, everywhere it's the same name pretty much. So you will find different content on each of these different platforms, depending on what you're looking for. You can try and look for the content of your preference.
So folks, you can always befriend cows. That's the catchword, and if you use that, you're going to pretty much find all this content that Preethi has been making. And I think we're going to update her introduction, folks. We are speaking with scientist, researcher, technologist, practicing champion for human cow friendship, and also producer of music and music videos. So it has to always come back to the artist. I believe everyone is an artist somewhere, and your art is showing. But let me come back to something that I was thinking about as you were describing about the background of this song itself, right? I was wondering what typically happens at a gaushala, which is a word that, if I am not mistaken, comes from a Sanskrit root, perhaps. And it means, as you described very well, cow shelter, or what was the other expression you used?
Rescue shelter is something you can say. So, so you can just break the word. Gau means cow, shala means house or shelter.
So the question I have is, in the cow shelters, the gaushalas that you've been associated with here in California or in Texas, and there are these folks, you mentioned the gentleman who set it up in Texas. Where do these cows come from?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So they're sometimes brought. So not all cows in a cow shelter are rescued. Some of them are actually born in the shelter as well, depending on how the shelter is set up, right? So oftentimes, gaushala is often thought of as a negative word, right? So if you go to India, there are several gaushalas where most often they are housing old, unproductive or unwell cows or bulls, or someone.
It's like a retirement home for cows and bulls.
Yeah. But what some of the shelters that I'm associated with in other parts of the world, they're thinking about gaushala from a very different perspective, almost to the point where we can reword cow shelter or rescue shelter as a cow sanctuary. Right. So sanctuary completely changes the perspective, right? So it's almost like a paradigm shift where you're creating this environment or an ecosystem where cows can live freely. It's so just like humans, cows should have that freedom to live for however long they want to live, right? So we have no right to actually decide that, I'm higher up in the ecosystem, so I'm going to actually kill you. And I guess that's the perspective most of these cow sanctuaries and cow shelters take. Right. And so I guess some of the cow shelters that I have been to, they are strongly believing in this perspective. And then there are some that I have come across, which is more like, we house only old, unproductive and unwell cows. We don't necessarily support like breeding. We don't necessarily milk the cows. And for us, it's like our goal is to actually rescue more of these cows that are being taken to a slaughterhouse. So the goals can shift a little bit, but overall, though, if you think about it, the foundation for whether they are rescuing cows versus they are helping them thrive in a new environment, it is actually that love and that support for another living being to actually exist or coexist with humans in an ecosystem.
In a country that consumes a massive amount of beef, I think we even import beef. Perhaps we export too. I'm not an expert in this realm, but certainly we are a very strongly beef producing and beef consuming country. In fact, I see these massive farms when we drive between northern and southern California, and I don't know if they're dairy farms or if they are, if cattle are being farmed for, beef. Your message, right, is going to probably be, alien to some people. I'm trying to find kind words. I'm trying to, but at the same time, hopefully it'll be eye-opening for others. And that's the reason why I asked that other question, like, how do these cows, because those are very contained environments, right? They breed them, I guess, they feed them, and then they take them to the slaughter house, or this, they're headed for getting slaughtered. The thing is, I was just wondering, that's why that, how do you rescue? Do you have like these missions where people go and like commandos go in and they open up, you use a steel I mean, it's kind of a strange thing to say, because obviously I think people are not doing that. It's not like you're rescuing someone being held hostage somewhere else. But how does that even work is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I can share an experience from an organization in South India. So what they do is, so in India there is this concept of cattle market, right? So in the market, people can bring cows and bulls to be sold to someone else. And what this organization does is they are, so I can also name them, so they are Kanchi Guru Parampara Foundation. You'll probably find a video about them on my channel as well if you're interested. And what they do is they go into the cattle market, they go prepared with money. So if there's anything that speaks for itself in this world, that is money, unfortunately. Right. So they will collect funds from people who are interested in rescuing cows. They'll go into this cattle market, and literally they are not going to go convince people like, oh, please don't buy for me, don't slaughter cow. Instead, they'll be like, you take the money, you sell the cow to me, I will take the cow and I'll take care of the cow. I'll move them to like a safe shelter, right? So that's the approach they take. And there are actually several articles on some of their rescue missions on like what they did, what were some of the conversations they had to have, for someone to actually give them, take their money and give them the cattle, right? Sometimes they've come across people who have kind of made up their mind. They're like, no, I'm selling this to this specific person because I already have this form of understanding or relationship with them.
Does that work here?
In the US, I've not come across anyone who has done that. I've mostly just focused on India for this moment, because India also happens to be one of the top 5 leading exporters of beef.
Right? Interesting. Folks, for those of you who don't know, and we hear a lot of commentary about how the majority of India's population is not beef consuming, but India is certainly a beef exporting country.
Yep, it is, right? So today, I think the relationship we have with cows and bulls is very extractive, right? So it's either milk or beef or leather, right? So, or their hide for leather. There are also other things like porcelain, for instance, is made from cow's product, right? So there are several other products that are actually not necessarily vegan, so to say.
Oh, you're going to go that route?
Yeah, I actually
have to have my dairy products. I'm sorry.
So I guess so because I
don't consume the other stuff. Let me tell you, I don't eat beef, but I do have to have my yogurt and my paneer.
Of course. So generally, veganism is thought of as like no milk products, but it's actually beyond that. Veganism is actually centered around animals' welfare, right? So no animal-based products. I don't think I'm completely bought into this idea of give up dairy, because I don't think that's the solution, right? So it's almost like the extreme, right? So and I'm a strong believer of like Hindu texts, right? And now that's a religious belief, and I don't know if all your viewers are going to have that belief system, right? So from the Vedic text, there is a saying that cows were actually created for the very reason that they are contributors of dairy products, but we have to be careful about how much we are consuming, right? So there has to be a limit to our consumer behavior. Today, we happen to incorporate dairy in almost every meal we consume, which is kind of creating that demand, right? And to kind of meet that demand, we are trying to get more of milk from the cow. And there are practices that are extremely inhumane, which is not at all it's not anywhere close to animals' welfare. So how can we actually think of a system that is animal welfare centered, and how can we actually make sure that cow has what she needs to exist or coexist with us?
Okay. Well, as long as you're not taking dairy off the table, I am willing to go along with it. And you can come back and tell us more next time as well, because I was getting a little worried that if you're going to cancel my, my little indulgence that I have with the basic dairy products, then, oh my God. But anyway, we have digressed. But while we're talking about this, and you've talked about cow waste earlier as well, and we're talking about being responsible. I think that's what you were trying to say about how we, obtain and consume dairy products, right? Not taking it off the table, but being responsible, being balanced, not being greedy, not being ultra consumer focused. The fact remains that, we are still farming cattle. It's probably not going to change overnight. And maybe the awareness that you and folks like yourself are bringing will probably help change our approach. But, and I read somewhere that, and I think and people have actually coming from a different angle have pointed that, to the fact that cattle farming, the way we do it on a massive industrial scale, right, could be a factor, I don't know how big a factor, but a factor in contributing towards global warming. In fact, some believe that at least, I think, what is the number that I just read? 25% of today's global warming is driven by methane from human actions, but a lot of that has to do with what we do with cattle because there are methane emissions. Is that damage measurably significant in your mind, A? And B, if it is, what can we do to contain it? As a multi-part question. And C, how does that fit with, we all have been made very aware in recent times, and people out there who don't believe that the environment is being impacted should definitely take note that you can try to pretend it's not happening, but we are experiencing some severe changes in our environment. The planet is under pressure. But in this context, right, should we just say that, we shouldn't have that many cattle? Is that what it is? Or we shouldn't do that kind of farming? Or there's a different way to capture that methane? Or maybe that's misleading and maybe it's not such a big problem. So what are your thoughts?
So I can only share my opinion, right? So I'm not an expert. I'm not a farmer myself, but I can share what I have learned based on, just conversations with experts in this field and just reading. And one of the things that we need to take into consideration is, yes, there is a lot of research that kind of points to, cows actually emit the maximum amount of greenhouse gases, just methane, right? And what do we do about it? When you think about that kind of data, the claim is usually made on environments where the cow is kind of kept cooped up. And the purpose of those farms is basically to breed. And a lot of this has got to do with like going out of nature, right? The regular nature cycle is a cow will breed when it knows she has to breed. Yeah, it's a lot like humans, right? We know when we are getting into like that reproduction phase. So similarly, cows and bulls, they know what they're doing when you leave it to nature. But when, on the other hand, if you're thinking about the actual farming practices today, there's a lot of like artificial insemination. There's a lot of like, the cow is, so a cow usually lactates when she gives birth to a calf, right? And to make sure that the cow is constantly lactating, a farmer can actually get her pregnant repetitively outside of her regular cycle, outside of nature. Which is again, the moment you go out of nature cycle, you are starting to harm nature. You're starting to harm the environment. right? So there has to be a paradigm shift in terms of how we take care of cows, the environment they are put in, not put them in like a closed environment. Cows by nature are supposed to be in an outdoor space. They are supposed to walk during the day so that they get their activity in, right? They are supposed to graze in a grassland. Today there's no concept of grazing in grassland. There may be some pastures, some of them kind of market, oh, these are pasture fed cows which have now turned to give you like milk or meat, right? There's actually a scientific concept to why cows kind of graze grass, right? So they love grass to start with. What happens is when the cow is actually grazing, the cow is also going to drop her waste, right? So she will kind of know which areas to graze. She's not going to stand in her poop and graze. She'll move to a different land. So while she is in a specific land, whether it's cow or a bull, they kind of are preparing that land to become more fertile, right? So that land will eventually become a land where you can actually grow produce. And that produce can feed both humans and it can feed cows. Right? So there you can already see there's like an ecosystem that is set up there. This kind of takes care of desertification. This kind of improves biodiversity in the area. It kind of helps the soil health. There's just so much that we lose out on. If we say, oh, let's just get a farm or let's get a barn which has no grass, we are just going to bring grass from outside. We're going to bring like hay or like cattle feed from outside and feed the cow, right? So those are some things that if we kind of take care of, we will be able to close that loop of, oh, the cow is generating methane. The one other thing we can do is, what can we do to that methane that's being emitted? Can we actually cycle it back into something like biogas or biofuel, which is what a lot of corporations are doing today, right? So I know there's a corporation in America that's doing this. They kind of try to work with farmers, dairy farmers particularly, and they're trying to create like CNG, which is like natural gas, and they're trying to power their trucks to use that natural gas, right? So there you're seeing another.
I'm so happy to hear this. I'm so happy to hear this on a personal level, because many years ago, when I had this entrepreneurial spirit within me, I was wondering about how we can capture, biogas or whatever you want to call it. It goes by different names. In India, it's called gobar gas because gobar refers to the cow waste, right? And having that knowledge, because this has been going on in India for quite some time, the whole idea of using that for energy and fuel in villages, so you wouldn't have to tap into other sources. And there have been a lot of efforts to make that more scalable. And I was thinking that it would be amazing. It would solve a lot of our personal fuel crisis here if we could tap into that. And I was met with interesting comments, like people would laugh at me and say, hey, give this guy a drink. He's going to make poop gas. So, it's, but the jokes aside, and those were jokes then, but I knew that meant people were not going to take it seriously. But the fact that we are doing it right here means that, times have changed and we are making progress. So that is very, very refreshing to know.
Yeah.
Preethi, we've been talking about your joy and I can just see your face lights up every time you're talking about your friends, the cows, the bulls, and, your passion, comes through in the way you describe your experiences and their experiences. Obviously, being with them gives you joy. And this may be a rhetorical question almost, or maybe it's a leading question, I don't know, but I would like to, maybe I'll just come out and say it and you tell me if this is true or false. I also feel that the joy is not just in the interaction, but deep down, it's the joy of giving. Because when you have given of yourself to them, and you know that you are helping further something that will bring them joy, and people who think like you, people who have signed on to this mission, right, to advocate for human cow friendship and try to further it, all of them are joyous with the efforts of each other. So is that true?
That's very true. Yeah, I think I wouldn't have said it better. It's very true. It's almost like a self-surrender, right? So imagine you are going to a rescue shelter and then you see cow poop, right? So usually in most of these cow shelters, in the US, it's a bit better, but in India, you can actually smell even just 10 feet away or 20 feet away from the shelter, right? And oftentimes I've actually, even today, I see people who kind of plug their nose and they're like, ew, this smells so bad. And the one thing I think to myself is, you are going to change, right? The more you come to the cow, because you will let go of that ego, right? You let go of the fact that, oh, none of this matters to me. What I value the most is this pure friendship I get when I'm next to a cow or a bull, right? So, and I guess that's why I call it self-surrender. It's like you are letting go of everything and you're giving yourself to another being. So.
Well, now you're going back and tapping into some of the ancient philosophy that you and I grew up with, I'm sure, in different ways. But that's the essence of what we always taught, that we should be aiming for that. But, even so, it's important that we keep doing what we are doing today, even if it's not entirely selfless, I think, as long as it's in the right direction, because I think through that practice, selflessness will arise and that surrender will happen. And maybe it's not everybody's cup of tea with or without milk right now, but it certainly is something that can grow. And, it's very heartening to see someone follow their passion the way you do. Given all the experiences you've had, advice would you give to Preethi Srinivas, let's say 10 years ago? Or pick any age if you want to. I don't want to talk about an age because it gets to be a sensitive topic. But pick an age, and at least 10 years ago, because I know you've gone through maybe you were, I don't, I shouldn't try to qualify that. I should just let you answer it.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I would tell myself from earlier in my age is stop to look around your environment and the nature, right? Because nature is that supreme power, right? So you can be from any belief system, it doesn't really matter, but nature hears you, nature feels you. And so when you do good things to the nature will take care of you, right? And cow is a part of nature, right? And cow, or any other animal for that matter, right? In my case, it so happened that I was able to build that bond with a cow. For others, it's a different animal, or a bird, or plants, whatever, right? So when you care for them, they're going to take care of you. I guess that's the advice I would tell myself, is like, just stop to think about everything you're doing, because that's really, at the end of the world, that's really what matters.
So folks, this has been amazing. This has been fantastic for me. I hope it's been, just as good for all of you listening to our guest today, who is a scientist, researcher, technologist, practicing champion for human-cow friendship, music producer, and philosopher too, I'd like to say, Preethi Srinivas. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners today before we wrap up?
Sure, yeah. Try to find a cow shelter or a sanctuary near you. Do visit cows. Because I think you will have a completely different experience, irrespective of what your beliefs are or perceptions are at the moment. You'll have a completely different experience. And again, thank you very much for having me on your show. I really hope this was, like a good time for people who are listening to our conversation. And do reach out to me if you have any questions, you're interested in collaborating, because I am working on a couple of projects, most of which are around awareness on this topic.
Thank you so much, Preethi. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing so much. Thank you for sharing your personal journey. And I hope, and not hope, I wish you the very best in this. And I will keep my promise. We will talk offline and we will visit Gaushala. I like that word much better than shelter, because somehow shelter makes it sound a little limited. And perhaps a sanctuary is a better English word. I don't know. But so we will visit a Gaushala together. And folks, I will report back on that too. So thank you again for your time. Folks, that was our conversation today with scientist, researcher, technologist, practicing champion for human-cow friendship, music producer, philosopher, and our new friend, Preethi Srinivas.
Thank you.
Ruckus Avenue Radio.